one of the things I'm quite interested about, so if you're, let's say you're a HR leader now and you're in an organization, let's say it's not a very big organization, 500 employees or 1,000 employees or something like that. How would they assess how inclusive their organization, like where do you start? If you think, well, if they watch this show and go, yeah, we need to do more, there's a real business case, I've missed this, we need to look into this, right, what do I start with? Where do they start to assess what they're doing now to know what they can potentially implement to make any changes? What should they do? Anyone?
I think to measure inclusion is, of course, a challenge. And I would say in global organizations like ABB, we are doing it through the engagement survey. So we actually have the annual survey. We have 3 questions around inclusion. So there it's really an opportunity to deep dive into that. If I was running a smaller company, I would do the pulse surveys, and I would do it on a much more regular basis. And it wouldn't be 50, questions survey once per year. It would be a couple of questions, testing the pulse every Friday or every second Friday. And that could be at least an indicator. Then, of course, we have the retention, we have the sick leaves, we have those more KPIs that you can evaluate that will give us some let's say, tracking on where we stand.
Okay.
I would say absolutely right, as Heidi said, and just to add on to that, you do start with the data you have. Very often I'll find HR directors reaching out to me and going, well, I'm completely lost. We actually don't track this data. So what do I do? So, well, you're answering your own questions there. You start with what you don't know and start asking yourself, what is the data that I'm not seeing? What am I blinded to? What are my own biases? What is different to me and perhaps something I've not experienced that I don't know of? What don't I know? And that's a really good place to start. What don't I know? Start with your data, quantitative. If you don't have qualitative data, start to gather it. You can do focus groups, you can do listening exercises, you can do facilitated external consultants coming in and doing some of the more challenging conversations for you. You can, if you don't have employee resource groups, you can actually form independently voiced employee resource groups, actually give them money to do their work, actually start putting them into strategic spaces intentionally to start listening while you build, say, your quantitative data gathering systems, or you build an HRIS system, or you're doing, so you can do things in parallel. But it's really about, starting to go and really assess, like how you would with any problem, right? Assess what you know, what you don't know, and then ask some of the questions that you wouldn't naturally ask. But do this listening, come to forums like this, reach out to the people after the forum. We all want to share. And as Heidi said, when we come together and share our different ideas, we're learning through this conversation. So imagine what you could get if you were an HR director and you either engaged with somebody that was completely different to you, or somebody that worked in a completely different space and has that experience and brings you the tech or other experience into it. You would come up with very different solutions. So I'd say those are good places potentially to also consider starting.
Yeah. Okay. So you've sort of measured your, and you think, okay, we need to do some more then. What steps do you take? So we talked about these sort of pulse and how we might measure it, but what kind of proactive interventions could you make? Perrine, perhaps you could explain some of the things that you've done with some of your clients and some of the businesses that you've worked with and what you've advised them to do. Is it just sort of unconscious bias training and just looking at sort of some of the structures, how they recruit? Like, what kinds of things should they, could they do?
Yeah, absolutely. The first step I always start with when any organization is starting to think about how do we go about creating a diversity and inclusion program. I always start with number one, understand why diversity and inclusion is important to you, and even before that, what does diversity and inclusion means to you, to your organization? Because we talked about it at the start. What does diversity and inclusion means to you in your organization? Because to one organization, it might mean we need more gender diversity. We're an all-male organization. There is male everywhere. We want more gender diversity. To another organization, it might be we need more ethnic diversity. We are just white everywhere. We live in a city of London where 40% of the population is non-white. We need to change that. To another organization, it might be we need more disabled individuals because maybe they believe in inclusion. Maybe they might be selling products for disabled individuals, etc. Right? So start by defining what is diversity and inclusion to you. And then once you've done that, understand why diversity and inclusion is important to your organization. Is it because you think you're going to better serve diverse communities and clients? Is it because you think it's going to help you sell new market, to new market? Is it because you think it's going to help you deliver better innovation? Whatever the reason, you need to articulate the why. Why is it important? Because if you don't articulate the why, things are not really going to follow through. And so write it down and then revisit your mission statement. Now, I don't mean you need to write a 10-page document about your mission statement, but articulate in a few words in your mission statement what diversity and inclusion means to you and why it's important to your organization, right? Those are the fundamentals. And then start by setting goals, setting diverse, clear, measurable diversity goals that are tied to monetary compensation. I believe that if we set goals and we say within the next 12 months, we want to increase our female in leadership and reach 50% female in our leadership team. And then you reward with, I believe, monetary incentives, because what gets measured gets done, and what gets monetary compensated gets done even faster. So the same way you would reward a sales manager for achieving their sales target, you should reward executives for achieving their diversity goals, like Starbucks is doing, like Nike is doing, like McDonald's is doing, like all the big brands are doing. And then I think you should appoint, we talked about a diversity task force. I think if you could appoint a diversity and inclusion task force or committee sponsored by an executive to drive this project forward, to move the needle, to check every week, how are we progressing, to really keep that accountability. And then you need to get real about your own diversity and inclusion. Make a list of the last 10 promotions in your organization. Make a list of the last 10 new hires in your organization. Make a list of the last 10 people whose efforts you acknowledge in your last team meeting. Do you notice any commonality, any pattern? If it's the same kind of group, right? And then we talked about engagement survey, like Heidi talked about that. Could be a very simple 3 questions that you send every week to your team. I am proud to work for ABC company, or I would recommend ABC company as a great place to work, or I rarely think about looking for a job at another company. Employees rate 1 to 10, and you get a quick pulse to see how people feel engaged or not. So those are kind of steps that any organization can take to start with their diversity and inclusion programs.